Welcome to Alasquatch, the show all about Bigfoot in the great state of Alaska. I'm your host, Beans Baxter. So lace up your boots, zip up your coat, and come with me on an adventure as we explore all things cryptid in the last frontier. Hey Alasquatchers, thanks for tuning in. This is Alasquatch, the podcast about all things cryptid in the great state of Alaska. Hope everybody's doing good out there. We're in the throes of winter here in Alaska. Got a lot of snow in the forecast coming up. Luckily, my plow guy showed up today and knocked down a big berm that was building up in front of my garage. I have a little four-wheeler that I plow with, but it's not big enough to deal with a lot of the snow that we get, and we've got a lot more in the forecast. So thankful for my plow guy for showing up and taking care of that for me, because I wouldn't be able to handle it with my little plow on my four-wheeler. But anyway, I want you guys to be sure and turn your thoughts toward June and clear your calendars, because coming up June 19th and 20th is the Medellin Falls Bigfoot Festival in Medellin Falls, Washington. Tickets are available now, I believe. If you just go to Facebook and type in Medellin Falls Bigfoot Festival, or go to Google and search it, I believe you will be able to find the website to buy the tickets. It's pretty simple. I believe there's 2 tiers of tickets available, VIP and then general admission. There's going to be a lot of great speakers there. Amy Boo's going to be there. Will Omer's going to be there. Thomas Seawood, myself. Bob Gimlin's going to be putting in an appearance. It's going to be amazing. So be sure you guys check it out, and if you can get there, get there. You might want to buy your tickets and make your accommodations now. It is a small town. They do have limited accommodations, so make sure you get in now before this tickets sell out. I do believe they're going to sell out. So anyway, today we've got something a little different. If you guys remember, back in the late 90s, I'm sure if you're of a certain age, especially around my age, you probably remember the collectible card game craze that was going on. It kind of started with Magic the Gathering, and it kind of moved out to other things. I know when I was in college, I was really into the Star Wars collectible card game. It kind of came out around the time of the resurgence of Star Wars in the late 90s there. I had boxes and boxes of those cards. I don't know where they are now. Somewhere between college, the military, and moving to Alaska, they're gone. I gave them away, or they were destroyed or lost. I don't know. I wish I still had them. But today we're going to be talking about a new collectible card game that's coming out soon, and one that's based all around cryptids. If you guys head on over to metazoogames.com, that's METAZOOGAMES, metazoogames.com, you can read and see all about the new Metazoo game card game that's coming out. It's a new collectible card game. It's based around cryptids. I think it's going to be really cool. And today we're going to be talking to the creator of the Metazoo game card game. His name is Michael Waddell. He's going to be giving us some cool information about the card game in the interview, and where you can pick it up. I believe if you guys have any kids or grandkids that are into collectible card games or into cryptids, this might just sort your Christmas and birthday shopping right here. So this interview here might just take care of it. So anyway, guys, I appreciate you listening. Let's get into our chat with Michael, and I hope you check out metazoogames.com. All right.
Great. So thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Michael. So what can you tell us about this new card game, Metazoo?
Sure. So I'm going to kind of start at the beginning and give you kind of an aerial view of what the game is about, what we want it to be, and kind of where it is right now. So the whole genesis of the idea was, I'm a big gamer, especially in the trading card game world, right? So I grew up playing Pokemon and Magic, and back in, I would say, fall 2018, I was really disheartened by where I was kind of seeing what the kind of, the Magic Gathering, the Yu-Gi-Ohs, and the Pokemons of the world, what they were doing with their product, which was, in the case of Magic, they were focusing very much on kind of pricing their products in such a way that it was focused more on, people who could afford like $100 booster packs versus, the kid that would go into a gas station and, use leftover lunch money to buy like a booster pack. Right. And that's kind of the TCGs that I grew up with. And in the case of Pokemon, like, vintage product is really fantastic, but I really wasn't a huge fan of what they were doing with the modern product. It just didn't feel special or collectible to me, and I know that a lot of people felt a very similar way, and that's why there's just been this huge boom in vintage product prices, where people are spending tens of thousands of dollars on old Pokemon because they're trying to recapture some of that magic that they felt when they were a kid, right? So I can't afford $40,000 booster boxes, and I'm not a huge fan of what Wizards of the Coast is doing with Magic. So I kind of embarked on this journey to start my own trading card game. And I wanted it to have the same vintage feel that Pokemon had back in the late 90s and early 2000s. And I wanted it to have some of the same complexity of gameplay that Magic has, right? I didn't want it to be like a kid's game, but I also didn't want it to be, I wanted it to be appealing to kids as well, right? But I wanted to have a competitive scene that was taken seriously. Cryptids were interesting to me ever since I was a kid. I grew up in Brazil, and the cryptid community there is different, but it was something that always fascinated me. So when I came to the U.S. for college, and the cryptid community here is so much more developed and widespread and kind of meaningful to kind of the cultural history of the U.S., I became obsessed. And so for me, it was a very natural decision to focus on cryptids, especially since I know that the cryptid community in and of itself is very passionate. It's very large, right? And so I knew that if I could tap into that, there's already a bunch of baked in, like, fan base that I could kind of target, right? So I knew that, like, if you look at Instagram, there are millions and millions of posts of people who are doing fan art of Mothman, of Bigfoot, of all these small town cryptids as well, right? Not just the big ones. So there's this huge, like, cultural movement that's happening right now in the country that I think is very meaningful to people. And, potentially if there was like a game like Metazoo that could kind of centralize all that passion, it could be something that starts influencing our kind of cultural heritage even more. So that was kind of the motivation behind choosing cryptids for the game. Sorry, that was a long spiel.
Yeah, you just caused me to have an epiphany there, where I realized that, because I engage in looking for Bigfoot quite a bit, and I just kind of had an epiphany. I'm like, oh my God, I'm a Pokemon hunter.
Right, and it's special because, like, if you look at what's happening with Pokemon, people are looking back to 20 years ago, and they're like, or 25 years ago now, and they're like, this was something that was special to me back when I was a kid. So, like, engaging with the product now is something that's nostalgic for me. Right. I think we even have a better thing where it's like, this stuff is out there in the real world, and it's a part of our history. And so it's not just engaging with, like, some show that you had as a kid. Like, we're engaging with a part of our history when when you're playing Metazoo, for instance. And that hits on a nostalgic nerve that is, like, I think more powerful than what people experience with Pokemon.
Right. I mean, I can definitely attest to the nostalgia of things. I mean, I'm of a certain age where, things like Star Wars and, Super Friends and He-Man and all that kind of stuff, I just have that fondness for it. And, I got to admit, there's times when I spend my money on that stuff just because I miss that feeling, that I had back then when I, used to engage in those things. And there's and something you said about the history of things too. It really struck a chord with me because right now I'm doing a lot of research into an area here in Alaska called Port Chatham, where, it has a long history of Bigfoot sightings, and it's basically a ghost town now. And I'm trying to track down people that live there, and they're all of advanced age, and they're starting to die. And in fact, I just missed an opportunity to interview one of the residents she just died within days of me, reaching out to contact her. And we've got to start preserving this stuff, or it's going to go away.
And what's important about that is it's not going to be important really until people recognize that opportunity's gone, and that we're actually like living in it right now, right? So if you look at something like the Snallygaster, or even more recently the Fresno Nightcrawlers, right? Fresno Nightcrawlers, that was from like 6 years ago, and now it's like everywhere, right? So this is like, it's an evolving culture, and new things are entering into kind of the public consciousness. But like you just mentioned, things like certain stories are exiting that consciousness as well, right? Because, if you look at like the fearsome critters, things like the Snallygaster, things like, Cactus Cat, things like Rumtafusel, like all these different things that in the 1800s were a huge part of the lumberjack community. Now all we have from that folklore are like a few like somewhat crummy books, right, from that were written in like 1910 to 1930. So I think it's our responsibility to preserve this in a way that's interesting and will hopefully kind of interest generations in the future. And I think things like Metazoo and other products that are within the cryptid community are a really, really good way of kind of leaving a trace and promoting a message where before people didn't really care about these stories, now they do, right? And so, a really good example of that is like the Cumberland Dragon, where it is a story about, a dragon-type creature that people had experiences with, but they didn't, it didn't strike enough of a chord like Mothman did, for instance, where like a bunch of creative people like started drawing images of it. Like there's not a museum for it. It's just like one of those stories, but now we can bring that story to light in a way, and it's one of our most popular cards. So now that like we almost drive new people into the culture in that way, which I think is a really fantastic part of what we're doing.
Right. And I was looking through the website here at some of your featured cryptids, and I consider myself pretty well versed in the cryptid community. I for a few years, I pretty much lived and breathed cryptids, and I gotta say, man, there's some cards in here that made me kind of, what is that? Kind of, scratch my head. And you guys did your homework on these cards. I think one of my personal favorites, because I grew up in the area, is the Hopkinsville Goblin.
Oh yeah, yeah. People seem to really like that one. And we have a whole theme deck that's like built around it. So it's just one of those like super interesting stories that has kind of like an iconic imagery to it, right? Like the things on the log house or the wooden cabin, right? And this farmer with a shotgun trying to get these things off his roof, right? Like that is such a quintessential folktale that like, but it's representative of what a lot of these stories are, right? But some of them take and some of them don't, and it's a real tragedy when some of these stories just kind of fall to the wayside. When they're important to our cultural heritage.
Right. Well, like I said, I grew up not very far at all from where that happened, and I didn't really know about it until I was much older, and had actually, I think, maybe even moved away from the area. I didn't find out about it till I got the internet, and I grew up like literally probably 45 minutes from there.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, I'm sorry. How did you like go about picking your cryptids for the game?
So it was about a year-long process of doing research. I wanted cryptids that, like, look, I could fill the entire game with nothing but Sasquatches if I wanted to. So I had to choose cryptids that were important, cryptids that were sufficiently different from each other. Because like you'll have like a central story, and then you'll have kind of in the surrounding geographic areas stories that are like related to it, and maybe like that same story but with a twist. So you had to kind of identify which part of the tale was like the most important one. Since we are creating a game with like spells and whatnot, and these cryptids have abilities, like you want cryptids that are in different categories, right? So like the Thunderbird is obviously a lightning type, and you have the Rockslide Bolter that is something like Earth type, right? It's something that is related to mountains, whereas the Thunderbird is related to thunderstorms. So those kind of identifying the big ones, so the Mothman, the Jersey Devil, that was easy enough to do. It was kind of filling out the gaps with lesser known cryptids that required a little bit of research, right? And then cutting out really good choices for cards, because there was either a version of them that already, like, so for instance, we have Skunk Ape in the second set, but our main Sasquatch for the first set is going to be Bigfoot. And so, we have a lot of people who really like the Skunk Ape, but we decided that it was just one too many Sasquatches for this first set, so we had to move it into another set. We had to make some tough decisions, right? And so it was a balance of everything. And then we had people who, like, they reached out to us and they were like, hey, I've heard about the game. If you guys are still accepting card ideas, they would request a cryptid. And so, like, we have the Alabama White Fang that was, essentially a user-submitted cryptid. And what's really special is we have people who reach out to us, kind of like your story with Hopkinsville Goblin, and they're like, it's really meaningful to me that you have a cryptid that's, like, special to my small town. And, like, we have a small little gift shop associated with it, but, like, this is going to be something that, like, it's meaningful to them that their small town history is being recognized. And so, yeah, a lot of it's been user driven, and then kind of the base of that research was done by me personally, really a year before the game started kind of being released to the public.
Right. And is it, so it's a collectible card game, and you said there's spells involved. I played the old Star Wars CCG back when it, back in the late 90s, and that's really my only experience with collectible card games. So is it similar to that, or is it more like, you said it's kind of like Pokemon where they can cast spells and stuff? So is that just kind of maybe walk me through how the game is played? Like what do I need is a starter set to sit down and get this game going?
Sure. So the whole, like, the premise of the game is 1,000 years ago, a veil was put into place, and that veil is the things that, like, make cryptids hard to spot or see or photograph, and it's because they're hidden behind it. And that same veil is the thing that made magic kind of disappear from our collective folklore, 1,000 years ago as well. And the whole premise of the story is, in, like, 2022, the veil is removed and cryptids and magic kind of return to the world. And so, yeah, the game has cryptids, and the cryptids can battle, but there are also spells, there are artifacts that are all taken from the real world that have some basis in folklore or, mythology, but really U.S. focused. So, like, we have the Fountain of Youth in it, for instance, which is a Florida kind of part of the Florida mythos, right?
Right.
And we have, like, the Kensington Runestone, for instance. So things like that. And the big kind of what I would call the innovative mechanic is recognizing that the cryptids are a part of our world. It makes sense to me that your surroundings should impact the power of your cards, right? So if you're trying to play a Piazza bird, which is, a fire type cryptid, right? If you're trying to play that in the middle of winter, you're not going to get all the boosts that you would get if you were playing it, I don't know, in the desert, for instance. So there's that real world aspect that actually affects gameplay, and that is not something that exists in Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh. It's a somewhat unique mechanic to our game.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And the storyline you're telling me about there, I'm like, I want to see that. I want to see a cartoon or something based on that.
Well, what we're doing is I'm writing a serialized, illustrated story. So every week or every 2 weeks, a new chapter will be released, and it'll be kind of in book form, but it'll be illustrated book form. So it'll have like a few images every page, and like the whole idea is that that's kind of the medium through which the story is told, and then the cards are used to kind of like supplement that story.
Awesome. And you said this has an American slant on it, so I assume there's probably plans for more regional expansions.
Yeah. So the first few sets are going to be based entirely on U.S. cryptids, but then the next block of sets, what we call a block, right, which is just comprised of like a central theme upon which like these sets are built, right, is going to be yokai. So if you think about what, from a cultural perspective, the role that yokai play in Japan and more generally kind of some of the Asian countries is they're actually like an older version of cryptids, in the sense that dating back hundreds and hundreds of years, these were things that people thought existed and were walking among them, and that they spotted, and that were actively influencing their lives. So when I think about kind of the theme of cryptids being real and impacting our lives and being part of our cultural history, it's very much the same story of yokai. So yokai will be kind of that second thing that we tie into the story in the second block.
Wow, that sounds awesome. You got it planned out for future installments. I got to ask, man, what kind of Alaska cryptids are we going to see in the card game here?
Okay, so this is a difficult thing, and so the two cryptids that I can point to that really are, or maybe three, is and it's debatable as to whether or not these are Alaskan, but we have the Kushitaka, I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
Which is a sea otter type Sasquatch. That's kind of like a boogeyman. And then we also have the Tisharuk, which is kind of a serpent type cryptid. And if you notice, and then we have like the Gigi bird, which is something that is a fearsome critter, but like there are also stories about it existing in Alaska. The problem with a lot of Alaskan cryptids is that they have their basis in Native American culture or folklore. And as a white dude who lives in New York City, my attempt to talk about culture, the cryptid culture, in a way that is both meaningful but respectful, it's something that, like these indigenous cryptids, there are a few of them, but I'm not comfortable adding them into the sets just yet until I have someone who I would like, who's an expert in that field, who can talk about ways of representing them in a respectful way. Because a lot of these indigenous cryptids are still very much a part of the lives of a lot of these indigenous people. And I want to be respectful of that.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I understand. And the Kushitaka is it's an interesting legend, because it's one of those that it's kind of like a boogeyman, where it's like it'll take you, but they've also been known to be helpful too. So it's one of those kind of double-edged things where it's like, is it good? Is it bad? Is it, it's like a lot of the native legends, it's not necessarily all the time bad.
And that speaks to kind of, if you look at kind of the Greek gods or whatever, depending on kind of the mythology that you look at, the complexity of the character and what they represented was often a function of how integrated they were into society, right? Like, it's easy for a minor god, for instance, in the Greek mythology, to have like one role, especially if he or she wasn't important, right? But once like a god plays a role in the actual history, and there are a bunch of stories associated with it, that adds complexity to the character, and it makes it harder to say whether or not it's good or evil, right? Like, definitively. So I view a lot of the indigenous cryptids are in that same realm, where it's like they were and are still part of the history, and so there are so many stories associated with them that it makes it hard for me to say, hey, the Kushitaka needs to be a dark creature because it's it's evil, right? And then, like, but if I say that, and I say that definitively, I could, piss off some people who say that, well, there's a lot more nuance to that, right? And I just don't know how to navigate that yet. So it's something that I think that we need to address in a future set, but in a way that maybe we have more resources that will allow us to do it in a more delicate way.
Yeah. Or, I can see that, or maybe have them be able to be on both sides or something like that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so we've talked about the game. We've talked about how to play the game. We've talked about what it consists of. Where and when can people get it, Michael?
So you can pre-order it now. And the release month is March. So shipments will start going out. People will start getting them. You can get them on the MetazooMarketplace.com. But we also have a distributor, Golden Distribution, who is distributing the product to their distribution network of local game stores. So their distribution network is more limited than the big ones. So if you have a local game store that you go to, just talk to the owner if you have that kind of relationship with them, and ask whether or not they will hold Metazoo, and if not, to either contact Golden Distribution or to have the local game store contact their own distributor to actually start holding Metazoo. But yeah, coming out in March, and you can basically order whatever you want now, although things are selling out, which is great, but also, I guess it sucks for the people who miss out, but that's why we have multiple print runs that we're going to be doing. So good news and bad news, I suppose.
Yeah, actually that spurred me to ask you. I was going to ask if they were going to be limited edition, and if you miss out on the first wave, is that it, or the collectability of it?
Yeah, I mean, so the print run for this first Kickstarter driven set, we only have 2,500 booster boxes, a few thousand of each of the other products, and like we've already sold out of all the theme decks, and we've sold out of I think all the blister packs as well. So I wanted more product in stock for when the release was actually happening. But people have been really eager to pre-order this stuff, and it's going to get the game out there regardless, and it's going to drive kind of the justification for getting a new print run underway.
Right. And so for those that are in the collectible market for such things, I assume you're saying sooner is better in picking these up.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where I don't want the secondary market to get out of control, but at the same time, like, I handed out maybe 10,000 sample cards and for free to people, right? And I know that they're selling on eBay for $25 to $100 now. So like the secondary market is already taking off, which is a good thing. It indicates a healthy primary market. But people view this as something that's highly collectible, and I think that's justified. I just want people to play the game as well, So I want to kind of drive that. The price is always going to be really cheap on the primary market, like what we price it for on the marketplace, like the Metazoo marketplace. But then whatever people end up taking that and selling it on eBay, we can't really control that.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, Michael, go ahead.
Sorry, go on.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, I guess my point is we're never going to like price the product in such a way that it will exclude people. Like, we want those kids going to the gas station and buying our packs right off the rack with leftover lunch money. We don't want our booster packs to be like $100, even if someone turns around and sells it for $100 like the next day. Right. That's not our interest.
Well, man, it sounds like you're making a great game, an entertaining game, and an affordable game. And it's about a subject that I'm really passionate about. So I'm going to be sure and check it out. Everybody out there that listens to this show, obviously they're into cryptids. So I'm hope every one of them at least, checks it out. Maybe games aren't their thing, but it's always the collectability aspect of it too. So, yeah, anything else you want to shout out where they can get your website or any contact info?
Yeah. So metazoogames.com and then metazoomarketplace.com are our main websites. You can follow us on Instagram, metazoo_games. And we just post a lot of cool context for the game, but also, product images and artists who are doing really cool stuff, fan art sometimes. Like we're really trying to build a really positive and engaged community. So join us. Like we want you there.
Awesome. All right, Michael, thank you so much for coming on. And all you people out there, be sure and check out metazoogames.com. Big thank you to Michael for coming on and speaking to us. I really am excited about this new card game. I think it's going to be really cool. They've put a lot of work into it. I consider myself pretty well versed when it comes to cryptid and cryptid lore, and I've seen some of these cards that they're coming out with that made me scratch my head and run to Google. What the hell is this thing? So they've really, really done their homework on there. A lot of really cool, obscure cryptids. If you have kids or grandkids, or even yourself, that are interested in collectible card games, you can buy the cards, play the games, or you can just collect them. I'm sure there's going to be a secondary market for them. They might be a good investment for you. So check them out. Go over to metazoogames.com. Check it out. They're getting ready to launch here. I believe March 1st is the drop date. They've got a timer counting down on the website. So head over there and check them out. I think it's going to be really cool. Really excited to see some quality cryptid products coming out. So often in the cryptid world, a lot of cryptid products that you see, they're just kind of cheap baubles or tchotchkes that you see like in a tourist trap or something like that. But I think this is a quality product, and I think it's going to give you a lot of entertainment if you pick it up, if you're into that kind of thing. So anyway, guys, be sure and check out the Alaskwatch podcast webpage. That's at alaskwatchpodcast.com. There's links to the podcast on there. You can listen to it in an embedded player. There's news on there about places I'm going to be, things I'm going to be doing, podcast appearances I'm going to have, and all kinds of cool stuff on there. Eventually, we're going to have a store up on there where you're going to be able to buy Alaskwatch swag and my books and stuff like that. So swing over there and give us a peek. If you like the podcast, give us a like and review. Head on over to the YouTube page as well. Check out some of the videos I got over there. There's links to the videos on the website. And I really appreciate you listening, guys. And be sure and check out metazoogames.com. Like I said, it's so rare to get quality cryptid products here in this genre. And I think Michael might be onto something with that. So appreciate your time, and I hope you guys really enjoy the rest of winter out there. Hopefully the worst is over.